I still have that notebook, and every now and then, I flip to the page where I wrote. The radio didn't break. We just needed time to hear each other again. That was 1953, and even now, whenever I hear static, I pause. Because silence, I've learned, can mean two things. You're either hiding, or you're about to be heard. And either way, you better be ready to listen. Everyone on Elmwood Lane had a flag. Ours hung from a wooden pole Daddy installed after the 4th of July parade in 1951. He said it made the house look proud and proper. I remember how Mama smiled politely, then went back to scrubbing the sink like it had called her name. There were 10 houses on our block. 9 had fresh paint. 6 had new Chevrolets. 1 had a pool, though it wasn't really theirs. It belonged to the community, but they were the first to jump in when it opened that summer. We had a flag, a 2-bedroom ranch, and a Philco radio cabinet that Daddy wouldn't let us touch unless it was Saturday or something global was happening. And back then, everything felt global. I was 13 the summer the drill started. The first time, we thought it was a fire. The bell rang twice, sharp and fast, and Miss Carpenter shouted, "Under your desks." Now, we didn't question, just dropped. Tommy Breckenridge bumped his chin on the edge of the metal and whimpered. Jenny Platt's glasses fell off and cracked in half. I remember the sound, like a grasshopper snapping its legs. When it was over, we stood up slow, dust on our pants, silence in the air. Miss Carpenter didn't smile. "These are precautionary measures," she said, eyes not quite meeting ours. "Just in case." She didn't say in case what. But by that point, we already knew. The word communist had started slipping into grown-up conversations like a leak no one could find. I heard it at the barber shop, on the bus, between the clatter of dishes at dinner. "They could be anywhere," Mr. Lang from down the street said one evening. "Right here, under our noses." He looked at Daddy when he said it. Daddy didn't blink, just said, "Well, they haven't taken our roses yet," and watered the front lawn like the Cold War didn't reach our grass. Mama began pulling the curtains more often. She said it was to keep the sun from fading the couch. But the couch was already faded. She scrubbed the windows every Friday, humming hymns under her breath. But sometimes, if you caught her at the right angle, you'd see her pause, sponge in hand, eyes distant, like she was waiting for something to come through the glass. One night, I asked her if she was scared. She said, "Only fools aren't, honey." Daddy worked in insurance, wore a fedora to the office, said things like dollar for dollar and peace of mind is policy-backed. He kept a revolver locked in his desk drawer. I found it once when I was looking for tape. When I asked him what it was for, he said, "Security." When I asked what from, he said, "Let's hope we never find out." That August, a man came to our school with a slideshow projector and a stack of pamphlets labeled Survive and Rebuild. He told us how to find shelter, what to keep in a basement, which foods lasted longest, how to recognize radiation sickness. He made it sound like a camping trip. Tommy threw up in the hallway afterward. Then the radio went silent. Not all at once. First, it was just static where the news used to be. Then the voice of Mr. Cronkite cut in and out like he was underwater. Then nothing. I turned the dial so hard I snapped it off. Mama called the power company. They said the towers were undergoing review. Daddy said nothing and stared at his untouched dinner. That night, he pulled the radio cabinet into the garage. "Fried tube," he said, but his hands shook as he carried it. In the evenings, I'd sit on the porch and watch our street. Kids played hopscotch like nothing had changed. Flags still fluttered, lawns still watered, but the air felt different, like something was pressing against it. A few nights later, I saw Mr. Lang digging in his backyard. Just a small hole at first, then deeper. By the end of the week, he'd built a frame, plywood, sandbags, a door that locked from the inside. I asked Daddy if we were going to build one too. He looked out the window for a long time, then said, "We already have what matters. Some folks think bunkers protect you. I think truth does." I didn't understand what that meant. Not then. School started again in September. We had our second duck-and-cover drill the first week. Then another 2 days later, Jenny Platt got new glasses. Tommy Breckenridge stopped talking entirely. Miss Carpenter smiled less. Then one Friday, Mr. Lang's wife disappeared. Mama said she'd gone to her sister's in Michigan, but I saw her crying into the sink 2 nights in a row. Mr. Lang stopped waving when he passed. He stopped watering his lawn. He stopped hanging his flag. One afternoon, I walked into the garage and found Daddy staring at the back of the radio. No tools in hand. Just looking. "You think it's broken?" I asked. "No," he said. "I think sometimes the world just doesn't want to be heard." He patted the top of the cabinet. "But it always comes back. It has to." I believed him. But that night, I dreamed of silence so loud it broke the windows. Some things were never said aloud. We just watched for signs and listened for what didn't come back. After the radio died, time did something strange. We still had clocks, sure. Still had bells at school and the clatter of the mailman's steps. But it felt like everything in between stretched, like a rubber band right before it snaps. People started whispering more. At church, the hymns got quieter. At the grocery, the lines grew longer, but no one talked while waiting. At school, the principal stopped saying the pledge over the intercom. The flag was still there, but it didn't seem to mean the same thing. Mr. Lang stopped leaving his house. His bunker had a wooden hatch now. Someone said he bought locks from a guy who used to work at the train depot. The kind of locks that need 2 keys. One for the outside, one for the in. We didn't ask questions. Mama made a casserole for his porch. It stayed there 3 days until the rain turned it into something unrecognizable. Daddy started coming home later. He said the office was adjusting its schedules, but I saw the way his coat smelled more like tobacco than usual, and his tie was crooked more often than not. Mama never mentioned it. She just made stronger coffee and listened to the faucet drip when she thought no one was near. One night, I found her folding old photographs into a shoebox. "Just organizing," she said, but her hands were trembling like paper. At school, we had a new boy. His name was Lyle. Came from somewhere west, Idaho or Iowa, Miss Carpenter said, as if it didn't matter. His clothes were neat, but his eyes weren't. He didn't speak much, except when answering directly. And when he did, his words came slow, like he was translating them in his head. He had no accent, but he felt foreign anyway. Tommy Breckenridge wouldn't sit near him. Jenny Platt offered him half a sandwich once, and then wiped her hand on her skirt like she regretted it. At recess, Lyle read alone. Not comics, but a thick green book with no pictures. I asked him what it was. He looked up. "Science," he said. "About waves. Sound. Frequency." I nodded, pretending to understand. "You know radios can hear more than people?" he added. I didn't know what to say, so I just said, "Ours doesn't work." He looked back down at the book. "Sometimes they still listen." One Thursday, Mama called Grandma in Harrisburg. I sat on the steps with the phone cord brushing my ankle. The conversation started normal. How was the weather? Was the garden still holding? But then Mama lowered her voice. "I don't like the silence," she said. "No, not just the radio. Everything. People are watching too close or not enough." The mail's late again. The bakery closed without notice. And the Lang boy hasn't come home from camp. I held my breath. She noticed me then, smiled too quick, and hung up soon after. That night, I followed Daddy out to the garage. He opened the cabinet where the Philco had been. It was empty. "Where is it?" I asked. He didn't answer. "Did you throw it out?" He shook his head. "Then where?" He looked at me. Finally, long and quiet. "It's somewhere safe." Lal didn't come to school the next day. Miss Carpenter said he had a family emergency. No one asked questions, not even Tommy. But I saw Ginny whisper something to Maggie, and they both looked at me, as if I'd know more. On Saturday, I heard knocking. Soft. Not at the front door, the side. Mama answered. A woman stood there, not much older than Mama, holding a paper bag and a rolled-up rug. Her shoes were muddy, her eyes red. Mama didn't speak, but stepped aside. The woman walked in. They didn't go to the living room. They went down into the basement. I wasn't allowed down there after dark. Later that night, I sat in bed and stared at the ceiling. Then I got up. Careful not to wake Mama or Daddy, I crept down the hall. The basement door was closed, but I could hear them. Soft voices, two women, and a sound like wood being shifted. Then humming, like a lullaby. I crept back to bed and dreamed of radios turning themselves on in the dark. Sunday at church, the preacher talked about peace. Not just war peace, but peace of spirit and peace among neighbors. He said peace wasn't always quiet. Sometimes peace meant standing firm when the world wanted you to sit down. He didn't mention anyone by name, but I saw Mr. Lang sitting in the back row for the first time in months. His hands were shaking. He wasn't holding a Bible, just sitting, listening, like he wasn't sure if peace included him yet. That afternoon, I went to the garage again. The cabinet was still empty, but something had been dragged across the floor. Dust lines curved toward the far wall. I followed them to a stack of boxes. One was newer, closed tight, no label. I pressed my ear to it and heard something, not a voice. Not static, just presence, as if the silence was alive. I never told Mama. I never asked Daddy again. But I started watching. Mr. Lang's flag came back, but smaller and not on a pole, just in his window. Lal never returned to school, and the radio never came back to the living room. Some truths don't come through speakers. They live in glances, in locks, in the pauses between footsteps. The silence didn't end with a bang. It ended with a decision. One morning in October, Daddy came into the kitchen and said, "You're staying home from school today." No explanation, no note, just the sentence, dropped like a stone into a still lake. Mama packed my lunch anyway. She wrapped it tight in wax paper and handed it to me with a look I'd only seen once before when Grandma passed. No words. Just worry disguised as routine. We spent the day inside. Curtains drawn. No radio. No TV. Just the sound of someone, maybe Daddy, moving furniture downstairs. I tried to read. Couldn't. Tried to draw. Couldn't. So I just listened. Around noon, I heard it again. That same low murmur from the basement. Not voices exactly. Something below words. Movement without explanation. By 2 p.m. it stopped, and by sunset, everything returned to normal. The next day, I walked past Mr. Lang's house. He was on the porch, smoking, something he hadn't done in years. "Evening," he said. I nodded. "You ever wonder what you'd say if someone asked where you were? The day everything changed." I didn't answer. He exhaled, long, slow. The kind of breath a man takes after holding something in too long. "Well," he said, "I hope you'd tell the truth." Then he got up and went inside. That night, I asked Daddy if the radio would ever come back. He sat at the kitchen table and stirred his coffee for a long time before answering. Maybe. What would it say? He looked at me like I'd just asked about the shape of the moon. It might not say anything. Might just listen. The woman from the basement didn't come back. But for weeks after, Mama kept the back room made up, linens folded, lamp plugged in, as if someone might need it at any moment. One day I asked her, did she stay with us before? Mama paused mid-fold. She passed through. Where did she go? Where people go when they're safe enough to move. At school, they stopped the drills. No explanation. Just no more bells. No more duck and cover. Miss Carpenter even let us listen to music one afternoon. Not from the radio. from a record player she brought from home. The sound was scratchy but beautiful. It wasn't news, but it was sound. Then one afternoon, as the trees began to lose their leaves, I came home to find the Philco back in the living room. No announcement. It just sat there again, its wooden face polished, knobs intact, speaker cloth pressed smooth. I ran my fingers over the dial. It didn't turn, but it was there. Mama walked in behind me. "It's not plugged in," she said. I knew better than to ask why. That night, Daddy said grace longer than usual. At the end, he added something he never had before. "And for the silence we endured, may we never take sound for granted again." Weeks passed. Fall deepened. I turned 14. I didn't get a bike or a new jacket, but I got a notebook. Leather-bound. Blank pages. Mama said, "You see a lot. Maybe it's time you wrote some of it down." So I did. I wrote about the drills, about Lyle and the basement and the woman with the bag. I wrote about the cabinet and the static and how the quiet felt thicker than the walls. I didn't know if it was true, not all of it, but it felt real. And sometimes, that's the kind of truth that lasts. One morning, months later, I woke to the sound of the radio. Not loud, not music, just a voice. Calm, measured, reading the news. No fanfare. No, we're back. Just the weather, a story about crops in Kansas, and a baseball score. I ran to the living room. Daddy was already there, coffee in hand, listening. The volume was low, like a whisper you weren't meant to interrupt. I didn't say anything. I just sat down beside him. We listened together. And in that moment, I understood. It was never about what the radio said. It was about knowing someone, somewhere, was speaking again. That we weren't alone in the stillness. That the world hadn't gone quiet forever. Just for a little while. If this story meant something to you, even just a little, I invite you to subscribe. Every like, every comment, every click helps this channel grow. But more than that, it keeps the voices alive. The voices behind these stories. The voices behind the silence. Your support helps us bring these memories to life. With voices that carry emotion, images that feel like yesterday, and stories that remind us not just of the past, but of the strength it took to live through it. So if you feel that, even quietly, consider subscribing. It's more than a button. It's a way of remembering.